It is indeed a blessed privilege the good Lord has given us once again to seek Him in the study of His Word, and we pray that God's Spirit would guide us as we open our hearts and our minds. We will continue in the study of Proverbs chapter 23. This chapter is quite characteristic. We have here a list of do not. It is quite clear in each of these Proverbs, God is giving us very direct, straightforward instruction not to do certain things. And He gives good reason why as well. And so, if God said not to do, it is only wise for us to follow God's instructions. Certainly, He tells us what is good for us, what is important for our lives, even at the present time. Many people raise the question, well, Bible is thousands of years old. How can it be relevant to us today? Certainly, human beings on this earth are no different. Their contexts may have been different, their practices may be divergent, but still we all have our own and similar human mentalities and human ways of thinking. And it is the same devil who has been tempting people through these over 6,000 years of his interaction with human beings since Adam and Eve. And so, wise men through the centuries, in the ancient times, as they have seen situations, they are passing on information, admonition, and dictates of God so that we will not be callous, we will not be blind, we will not be unconsiderate to these teachings that are passed on to us. It is one thing to hear, but another thing certainly to follow these, to know their value for us. We will look at the Proverbs in verses 10 and 11 for our study today. Chapter 23, verse 10 and 11. Do not remove the ancient landmarks, nor enter the fields of the fatherless, for their Redeemer is mighty. He will please their cause against them. We see this a repetition of what we heard in chapter 22, as the chapter, a number of occasions, finally closed with telling us the importance, the gravity of the situation to change or to remove the ancient landmarks. And even today, we can see stones that are placed as marks of separation between adjacent properties that belong to different people. And some people knowingly change landmarks. People who desire to possess more from their neighbors, and in the absence of their neighbor or the neighbor not watching, they tend to do this. And certainly this is nothing but stealing, robbing somebody's property. In the ancient times, if there was really no other mark of identification, that stone certainly was very significant. And moving that stone, we have seen in previous Proverbs that it is calling a curse upon them. So symbolically and literally too, these ancient traditions even have value for us, that we should practice, that we should be mindful and not to change, showing disregard for the law. When a landmark is placed, it is usually done with the agreement of the two parties, that this is the line of separation. But one in the absence of the other, we see trying to manipulate, trying to change. This, we know certainly, can cause doubts and suspicions, if not now, even later, at which time the one who has done may have even forgotten. But certainly the law will take its course and justice will be meted out, and it will be shameful if people should come to know that you are the one who has changed a landmark. And most often, people who try to change these landmarks are taking advantage of their neighbors. Either they are weak, they cannot complain to you, they cannot face, because maybe if you are wealthy, you are rich, and you are influential, what will a poor person do to speak against you? So we see people who take advantage of the vulnerable position in their neighborhood and then venture out to move these boundary stones simply to steal the land that belongs to somebody. And we are even warned that in doing so, or even disregarding a landmark, and you enter into the field of someone who is by your side, and especially if it is one of a fatherless family, a family which does not have somebody that they could rely on, somebody who could support them, somebody who could fight for them, most times be it the father or the sons, and in their absence, certainly such a family is at the mercy of a rich or an imposing or a threatening neighbor. Because we know the weak in this earth are always taken advantage of, because there is nobody to defend them, nobody to help them. But then, the second proverb, we see God acting as their strong redeemer, who will personally plead their cause, take up their case against the one who has oppressed them. Certainly, this passage calls for justice. The poor family without much support or somebody to care for them are at the mercy of the rich neighbors. But even if they are taken advantage of, there is somebody who is looking at what's happening on this earth, somebody who will pass judgment, who will let honesty prevail, and it is God who will take special care for these helpless and warns those who are trying to take advantage of such helpless people that they are doing a serious offense in trying to cause trouble to the less fortunate ones. And in doing so to them, we are even doing it against God. And this is serious. For after all, All human beings on this earth are children of God. And when we ever try to harm somebody, mete out injustice to them, treat them undeservedly, we are doing this to God. And that is what Jesus will do at the second coming for those who have not done what was their responsibility. Jesus said, when you do this to the least of these, your brethren, you have done it unto me. Certainly, in doing what is not right, in meeting injustice to helpless, poor people, we are even doing this to God. In the ancient society, which was an agricultural society, moving landmarks certainly was equivalent to stealing and theft from their neighbor's land. And perhaps we can see this applicable even in our present time. You do anything deceitfully to violate another person's rights. We all know what our rights, what our privileges are, and in society, when by doing anything that impinges upon the rights of our fellow brethren, fellow human beings, is certainly equivalent to this moving of a stone, be it tangible or intangible way. If we do anything to violate another person's rights, certainly we know our Constitution grants us some rights by law. Everybody has agreed when the Constitution was made, but we can see clearly how these rights are defied, how people are put into serious problems, people's rights and their aspirations and desires are not considered, and out of selfishness we see violators throwing around their weight and taking advantage of the helpless people. Certainly care should be taken, special care to such people who are helpless. And in this proverb, the next proverb, we see these fatherless, these helpless people are under God's special protection. God will take care of them. This verse specifically warns against anyone taking advantage of such people who are in need of instead protection, but they are taken advantage of. People who cannot defend them, but they are the ones who are ill-treated. And so we are called upon to remember that there is God who is their defender. In the Hebrew language, the word used for such a defender is called Goel. Goel refers to someone who is a close relative, who could legally defend and physically too anybody who is wronged, someone to whom may be related to you. You may be the closest of kin, and it is your responsibility to take care of them, to defend when they are wronged. And this passage is telling us that God will take up his role as the one who will defend, who will give protection, and who will safeguard them during their times of trouble and being oppressed by somebody illegally. This passage certainly warns us Such practice is detestable to God, certainly not agreeable in society, but may be tolerated. But such an abuse of power and for personal gains, there is God who is promising that their Redeemer, who is mighty, will personally bring charges against their offenders, who will make sure that justice is meted to them. So this verse calls us and warns us to be careful in our wrongdoings. Many times we do, maybe intentionally or unintentionally, many times for a small little gain. But by doing so, we are only encouraging, showing that we are not considerate about the needs of others, that we should treat others kindly, and that we are not showing to others the love of God, whom we claim as his chosen ones. What kind of advocates are we then for God? Are we showing who God is truly to somebody else who needs to know? We, even in our present days, do encounter such situations where the weak are always exploited, be it financially or when there's social injustice or any such forms of oppression. We see this happening very much. And so this challenges us to take the cause of those who are deprived, those who are mistreated, those who are facing such serious problems in their lives, being so vulnerable, unprotected. We can stand even in the place of God to take the cause of such people. This is certainly a call for us, telling us what we should not do in terms of changing landmarks, or how we can come to their rescue to help them, even as God is the one who is there to help these helpless people. In showing these many lessons to us, what we should not do, we see this repetition telling us that these situations are quite common in human day-to-day life. And certainly it is ancient wisdom to be careful of these ancient cultural practices, not to move landmarks, but let them be as precise landmarks, making the needed distinction. In giving instructions in the Old Testament times, in Genesis 31, when Laban and Jacob made their agreements at separation, Laban said to Jacob, "See this heap and the pillar which I have set between you and me. This heap is a witness, and a pillar is a witness, that I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to do harm." Now, as they're parting, of course, their separation did not result with a good parting, but when they did meet up and Laban went up and met with Jacob, they made these agreements. These pillars, these heaps are landmarks that stand for something. And crossing that with an intention to harm someone that they have agreed upon And these things have significant meaning and practice in these ancient times. In Deuteronomy chapter 19, Moses talking to the children of Israel and telling them about the promised land and how God has planned for them to occupy the land, and God is the one who would set landmarks for them. He says, "You shall not move your neighbor's landmark, which the men of old have set in the inheritance that you will hold in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess." God is giving them the land. It is God who has promised them. But in stealing from somebody, you know you're actually stealing from God, because this whole land was given as a gift by God to his people. And so Moses warns very clearly not to move any landmarks, but to be careful in preserving what God has given. And such activity was certainly condemned, looked down upon as somebody who is unfaithful. In the book of Job, chapter 24 and verse 2, some move landmarks. This is not something that everybody does. For most people would follow their moral binding upon them, their moral laws. But there are some who move landmarks. They siege flocks and pasture them. Certainly, this is the nature of somebody whom we call a thief, who tries to take landmark from steal by moving landmarks and stealing flocks of others. In the ancient agricultural world, that was done by these illegitimate thieves who try to carry on such activity. God talking about the kings of Judah, how unfaithful they were, not rendering service to God appropriately, not taking care of the needs of the poor and needy. In Hosea chapter 5 verse 10 says, "The princes of Judah have become like those who move the landmark." So there is a stigma attached to somebody who moves a landmark. Such people who are unfaithful, who are thieves, who show no sign for satisfaction with what they have, but desire from somebody else. Upon them I will pour out my wrath like water. God says, such will not be tolerated. God's wrath will be poured upon them so freely. Yes, sin is identified and it has to be condemned. And we have to ensure that it is not repeated. These Old Testament passages that forbade this kind of an activity also comes with a consequence. In Deuteronomy 27 verse 17, Moses adds, "Cursed be anyone who moves his neighbor's landmark," and all the people shall say amen. We have read this verse before at the end of chapter 22 as well. A curse is pronounced. You cannot escape. This is even worse than cheating by defraud, but outrightly and openly stealing, and especially if you do this from somebody who is fatherless. Certainly, these are condemned. In the New Testament, Apostle James tells us what it is to be a true Christian, what is a true religion, and how we practice true Christianity. In chapter 1, verse 27, he says, religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their afflictions, to keep oneself untainted, unstained from the world. A great responsibility upon God's people, practicing pure and undefiled religion, certainly to care for the orphans and widows, these people who have no strength and support for somebody who would take up their cause. And we are called upon, therefore, to visit them, to stand for them, to take their cause, and to see that justice is ensured for them. When they go through difficulties and trials and so on, we should be there to help such people. And so in these wonderful collection of Proverbs, the wise man is showing us how we are to care for especially the less privileged. David in his life showed this so beautifully when he showed kindness to this fatherless, helpless person. Of course, he was the son of his good friend Jonathan, Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was a disabled son. And David, when he heard that this man was the son of his good friend Jonathan, though he was the son of Saul who tried to kill David, David still showed kindness to Mephibosheth, welcomed him into the palace. He gave him a seat on the table that David would sit for his meals, giving him support, showing him a kindness, and giving him a place and position, though he may be undeserving, handicapped. But David instructed that Saul's servant Ziba should work for Mephibosheth, take care of his lands and work on his lands, and be of help to him. To be conscious of the needs of others is something that we as God's people should always be careful of. When we see those who are in need, certainly we need to show responsibility. For in the second proverb, we saw how God takes care of these people who are helpless. God will be their redeemer. God will be their help. In Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 18, Moses, again speaking about what God would do, he says, he executes justice for the fatherless and the widow, and loves the sojourner, giving him food and clothing. This seems to be the way how most times God is associated with. God takes the side with those who are poor, the fatherless and the widows and the strangers. These people who may not be enjoying because they are the ones who are deprived, but God cares for such people. God provides for them. God is therefore asking us to show our kindness to such people. This Redeemer that we saw in this second proverb is very beautifully again illustrated in the story of Ruth and Naomi when they returned back to Bethlehem from the land of Moab. And as Naomi found her place in the city that she left found who her family and friends were, relatives. And now, when it came for the land of Ruth to be redeemed, and along with it, of course, it called for marrying Ruth. Boaz was prepared, but there was somebody who was even more closer in relation to Naomi. And Boaz made sure, gave him a privilege to redeem that land, which then implied that he would marry Ruth. But when that Redeemer kinsman was not prepared to do his duty, Boaz, the next in line of kinsmen, agreed, and Boaz stayed as a Redeemer kinsman, not only to buy the land of Naomi, but to take Ruth, this Moabite, a foreigner, to be his wife. And we know that kindness that he showed, that responsibility that Boaz took up, Ruth becomes one in the lineage of Jesus Christ. And what a blessing it is when God's people fulfill their responsibility. Certainly, God will work out great things for them. The book of Ruth is one beautiful example of God who is a redeemer of the fatherless. Here was Ruth with no family, but God made provisions, and she, in a way, by meeting Boaz, was meeting God himself, one who will care for the foreigners, the strangers, the orphans, and the widows. And what a wonderful story develops from here. And so we see these instructions through these two proverbs that we should be careful to be honest and faithful, never to move such landmarks, never to cause any illegal gains through our wrong and intentional breaking of such legal obligations, but rather we are called to be faithful. And if we should violate, certainly a curse is pronounced, and how we will have to stand before God and receive his wrath. But rather we are called upon to go a mile, a second mile, to stand for people who are less privileged, like a redeemer, God who being the one who cares for such people. God can use us to be those who would help those who are in need. Certainly, wonderful lessons for us to learn in our day-to-day life, that we can share and show to the people God's great plan and his intentions for his people and how he cares and protects for them. May God bless each one of us to share this in our lives and to experience these wonderful privileges that God has given to us. God bless you and have a blessed day.